I'm Staff Sergeant Holly Roberts-Davis, and thanks for joining us for Air Force TV's live coverage of the Air Force Association Air Warfare Symposium on DoD News. The theme for this year's conference is Innovate for Air Supremacy, and it's a chance for commanders and senior enlisted leaders to meet up with industry partners and discuss the way ahead for the Air Force on a variety of topics like acquisition, modernization, and the mission. For those who may not be familiar with the AFA conference, here's a quick look at some of the sights and sounds from the last get-together of the Air Force's top leadership.
My commitment, indeed our Air Force commitment going forward, is to continue to deliver global vigilance, global reach, and global power for America. We are extremely blessed in the Air Force because we have really impressive airmen. They are smart, they are dedicated, they are motivated. Airmen have always been the source of America's air power. As we look to the future, it is you who will carry the torch, who will make us strategically agile. It is you, the airmen of the United States Air Force, who will continue to make the impossible possible.
No problems are new, no challenges are new, no missions are new for us. It's just a new time. Circumstances are a little different, and we'll roll through these just like we rolled through the past ones. Most of you in this audience led us through them, and we got a whole lot of people here in the front of this room who are going to lead us through the challenges we're facing today. I don't worry about that, because we need to be bold, we need to be a little fearless right now. We need to realize that we can spread our wings a little bit, and in fact I believe as a service we have to.
Everything we do in our United States Air Force is going to be done on the backs of our airmen. We're going to work hard, we always have. We live to that legacy every single day, and we will into the future. It's what makes us who we are. And as we move forward, we're going to do some pretty significant things. We have to evolve the systems that have been in place a long time, that worked for quite some time and did what we needed them to do, and really think about what they need to do in the future. We'll remain this world's greatest Air Force because we have the men and women just like you and the thousands of them around the world doing exactly what their country needs them to do. Every single day, every moment of the day.
So as you can see, the AFA conference is a forum for the Air Force's top leaders to share their vision for how the Air Force will continue to fly, fight, and win in airspace and cyberspace. For this AFA, Air Force TV has a crew in Orlando, Florida to bring you live coverage of several of today's key presentations. Sergeant Kurtz, are you there?
Hey, Sergeant Roberts-Davis. Yes, we are here live in Orlando, Florida, and the Air Warfare Symposium is well underway. In fact, as you can see behind me, people have just left the auditorium. They've already wrapped up the second panel discussion of the morning, and we're just standing by ready for the third one to kick off here in just a few minutes. That's going to be a panel on combat air forces, and it's scheduled to start at about 10 minutes past 10 this morning. You know, I had a chance yesterday to meet with Mr. Scott Van Cleef. He's the chairman of the board for the Air Force Association, and I had a chance to ask him about AFA and why he thinks it's so important for the Air Force to be a part of the Air Warfare Symposium. Here's some of what he had to say.
The Air Force Association has a very broad mission. We're a nonprofit, independent, professional military and aerospace education association. And our mission basically is to support the Air Force and the idea of aerospace power. We do that in a number of ways. One of those is to advocate for the Air Force and for our airmen and their families. We also educate the public about the critical need for aerospace power and for a technologically superior workforce. And finally, we support our airmen's families, and we support aerospace education.
Thank you for that report, Sergeant Kurtz. We'll be checking back in with you in just a minute.
All right, sounds great, Sergeant Roberts-Davis. We'll be standing by.
All right, that was our very own Tech Sergeant Nicholas Kurtz. He's down in Orlando, and we'll be checking back with him throughout the day. But first, here's a rundown of what's coming up during Air Force TV's live coverage of the AFA conference on DoD News. First up, as Sergeant Kurtz mentioned, in just a few minutes, we'll bring you a live look at the Combat Air Forces panel discussion featuring the commanders of Air Combat Command, Pacific Air Forces, U.S. Forces in Europe and Africa, and Global Strike Command. Later in the day, we'll have a live broadcast of Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Mark Welsh's Air Force update. Right after that, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, James Cody, will take the stage to deliver the enlisted perspective. In addition to our live DoD news coverage, we are carrying a live web stream of every panel discussion and presentation at this year's AFA. It's going on right now, and you can watch it all live on af.mil. The next web exclusive live stream will begin today at 11:10 a.m. Eastern Time and feature a panel discussion on weapons and tactics. And don't worry if for some reason you can't stick around to catch every event as it happens, because everything will be available on Air Force BlueTube shortly after the end of the conference. Now we're going to send it back out to Sergeant Kurtz in Orlando, who has some more information on what's coming up next. Sergeant Kurtz.
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Roberts Davis. Yeah, we're just standing by right now, and in just a few minutes, the Commander of Air Combat Command, General Hawk Carlisle, will take the stage, and he's going to be joined by USAF Commander General Frank Gorenc, PACAF Commander General Lori Robinson, and the Commander of Global Strike Command, Lieutenant General Stephen Wilson, to discuss combat air forces. And you know, at the last AFA up in Washington, D.C., outgoing Air Combat Command Commander General Mike Hostage spoke on a very similar topic, and he shared some of his insights into leadership, basically what he learned about leading from the front and how that lends to commander's credibility as a combat commander. Here's what he had to say.
It is through credibility that our military leaders can ensure that their troops and our civilian leaders place credence on what they say. This credibility is the basis for trust in our best military judgment. Budget cuts, force structures reductions will ultimately make us a smaller force. But by leveraging the technology of today and the advancements of tomorrow, we can be more capable force with the ability to counter our most dangerous threats. In addition, we must retain the capacity and capability to deal with our most likely threats, sustaining the hard-earned skills and lessons learned during the most recent conflicts.
Now on this panel, we expect the commanders to be talking about, well, combat air forces, and they'll be discussing strategic agility and the role they expect that to play in helping us build the air force that we need. Again, that's going to start at about 10:10, so just a few minutes. People are starting to filter in to the auditorium behind me now, and we will bring that to you live as it starts right here on DoD News. Back to you in the studio, Sergeant Roberts Davis.
Thank you, Sergeant Kurtz. You know, when we're talking about combat air forces, our Airman Magazine team actually just got back from a trip to Alaska, where they featured some of the intense training that our airmen go through to learn how to survive in extreme environments. Here's a short look of some of the incredible footage that they got at Cool School.
If that aircraft goes down, you're in the middle of nowhere potentially. You're not walking to a road. You know, you don't see lights in the distance. It is you in the desolate areas in Alaska, and it can be pretty frightening. If you can imagine being by yourself in the middle of nowhere, you just egressed from a fighter, and you're out there. You're floating to the earth, and all you see is thousands upon thousands of miles of nothingness, just trees and snow. We at Arctic Survival, otherwise known as the Cool School, we got about 8 instructors up here, and we focus solely on how to take care of yourself in an Arctic environment. We get people from all walks of life in the military here in Alaska mainly, but we get people from outside as well that come through the course because of where they work. The fact that they're flying a mission that is going to take them in potentially Arctic-like conditions. Therefore, they need to know how to take care of themselves in case the worst case scenario happens. They have to bail out, they crash, whatever it may be. Because quite frankly, it's a very harsh, difficult environment to have to deal with.
That was just a preview of some of the amazing content in the latest edition of Airman Magazine, which is available to download now for your mobile device. Just look for Airman Magazine in your app store. Well, the panel on combat air forces should be about ready to begin, so let's send it back out to Sergeant Kurtz live in Orlando. Sergeant Kurtz?
Hey, thanks, Sergeant Robert Davis. Yes, people are starting to walk into the auditorium behind me, so we will bring you the start of that panel just as soon as they take the stage. I just want to take a minute to remind everybody watching that you can join the conversation. Follow the Air Force on Twitter. That's at U.S. Air Force. They'll be live tweeting from several of the events throughout the day, so you can follow them on Twitter, and they'll be here at the Air Warfare Symposium today and tomorrow. And like I said, you can also join the conversation. You can just use the hashtag AWS15. That's hashtag AWS15. Use that to leave your own comments and thoughts about all the events here at AFA, and to search to see what everybody here at the conference is talking about on Twitter. Well, they should be starting the conference, the next panel discussion on combat air forces here in just a few minutes. People are filtering in, and I can hear them now. That's Mr. Scott Van Cleef up on stage. So we will send you now live into the auditorium for a panel on combat air forces here on DoD News.
Next topic of our next panel, rather, is combat air forces. I know you're going to enjoy this one. I'll introduce each of the panelists this morning, and then following their opening remarks, I'll return to facilitate the question and answer session. Please keep your cards and letters coming. Pass them to the cadets in the center aisles, and we'll get them up here so that I can ask those. Copies of their bios are in your program. Our first panelist is the Commander of Air Combat Command, General Hawk Carlisle. Our next panelist is Commander of the United States Air Forces Europe, General Frank Gorenc. Next we have General Laurie Robinson, Commander of Pacific Air Forces. And finally is Lieutenant General Stephen Wilson, Commander of Global Strike Command. Panelists, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. This is a great opportunity. What we'd really like to do, I think, is spend most time answering everyone's questions, but we will all make some opening comments here. From my perspective, obviously, I think first and foremost, I'd like to thank Mike Hostage for what he did for Air Combat Command and setting me up for success in taking this position. Tremendous commander of Air Combat Command and a brilliant guy, and so I'd publicly like to thank him for everything he did. Priorities with respect to my ability to provide the warfighters everything they can get and need in a time of fiscal constraints obviously is a huge challenge for us. We kind of established as everybody in the Air Force does, first and foremost, the priority is to take care of airmen and their families, these incredible young men and women that go out and do the job every day and raise their right hand, swear an oath to our nation, and put themselves in harm's way. As part of that, obviously, we got to continue to mentor them, we got to grow them, we have to equip them, we have to train them, and we have to provide them all those things to win today's fight, as well as be the best Air Force we can possibly be in the future, given the resources the American people give us. So those are kind of the three priorities we look at. And the 5 core functions, and we'll talk about all of them, and again, more than happy to answer any questions. Specifically on the individual core functions for the C2, kind of the EACHs, the JSTARS recap we're working on, and that's moving forward. We're looking at how to move the E3 recap somewhere farther left if we can, but inside the top line, that's a difficult challenge for us to do. And then the AOC weapon systems. We had a C2 summit as part of WebTAC in January. I had all the MAGCOM commanders there, tremendously successful to work the vision of what big C2 looks like in the future, while we take care of all the EACHs underneath that, and what is the AOC, the future, and the command and control of theater air power in 2025 and 2030, and what steps can we take to work our way there. So very successful summit, and things went very well, and we're working that vision for the future and how we're going to get there. On the Global Integrated ISR portion of the core function for us, 25th Air Force stood up. Jack Shanahan's doing fantastic work out there. We are looking how to get the synergy of that NAF and what it can do to provide the warfighters everything they need. As everyone well knows, the most in-demand capability for the requirement capability for the Air Force is C2 and ISR, and our ability to meet the combatant commander needs in ISR across the spectrum of different platforms is a challenge. Jack's working that hard. And the way forward on many of those systems and some of the things we're doing is part of the EACHs, but the big picture of ISR for the future and the C2 of ISR is one we're working hard again, and that was part of the C2 summit as well. Global Precision Attack, the F-35 program is obviously near and dear to our hearts. Going well, working hard for the IOC. We got some challenges. We're going to do everything in our power to get there. Weapons and the advanced weapons that we're looking at for the future and what's going to be part of the portfolio for all our global precision attack platforms and what those look like with respect to sensors and modes that we're going to work on. Those are all things that heavily involved in, but again, I think the GPA portfolio is one that is, again, heavily in demand, working hard to get there. Air superiority, Mike Holmes has talked about it, the A58. There's been discussions on FX and what's next. 6 generations are the names, the things that are talked about out there. The Air Force is kind of going back to the future a little bit and things we used to do a lot and we're a bit better at and we're going to go back to, and that is capability developmental planning. The first one of those capability developmental planning is going to be Air Superiority 2030. The intent of that is to look across the spectrum, across the domains, take in the lab work that we're having out there, some of the things that are being done by industry, and look at how, given an increasingly threatening potential adversaries out there and their capability, how do we go across domains and do everything within our power to maintain air superiority in 2030 using all domains, all technologies, and all capabilities, and the family of systems to provide that air superiority. That's going to kick off here very soon, and it'll be in a CAF, all of us CAF-wise, and then the air staff will work on that, and I think you'll see a lot come out of that. We're going to go to industry a lot to get ideas from them. We're going to take advantage of the labs, and we're going to have what's called a capability collaboration team, a CCT, to start working the Air Superiority 2030. And then finally, PR, the CRH is coming along well. I think that the PR Guardian Angel, and again, hugely in demand capability. We're working hard on those. We're looking at PR in a contested environment as well, and what that looks like in the future, and that again is moving on very well, and as well as the roles across the spectrum in support of PR and CSAR in the future. So looking forward to your questions, and looking forward to anything that we can provide and bring the crowd into in the discussion. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Gord?
Thanks, Hawk. Before I get started, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the AFA for all of the work that they do. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this organization, and the education that they provide and the advocacy that they give us, and certainly the support that they provide for our entire Air Force is greatly appreciated. And I know that they're out there every single day describing what it is that the world's greatest Air Force is expected to provide to America, and in a real way, they help us fill the aspirations of everything that's possible from air. So thanks to the AFA. I was really excited. I was up early this morning because I'm on European time, and I was able to watch the first panel. The C2 panel was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, particularly coming off of the C2 summit that we just did. And so C2 continues to be the core competency that wraps up all of the other capabilities that we provide. And, together with fantastic C2, we're able to exponentially increase the precision and the power and the speed and the flexibility of air. So already 1 hour into it, I feel completely fulfilled after my enjoyable flight in 38 Delta on the way over. The only thing I want to add to Hawk's comments, and first, the other people I need to thank is Hawk, because we're kind of a mixed blend over there in Europe. I'm able to benefit from the work that he does on the CAF side and Darren McDou's work he does on the MAF side. Both Lori and I are kind of in that position, and obviously they're very gracious about the inputs that we make into shepherding CAF power or MAF power. Of course, what I am able to do is provide the view of partner nations and, more importantly, our allies. The NATO alliance obviously is increasingly in the news lately, given President Putin's antics over there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on Atlantic Resolve and all of the things that we are doing. But the bottom line is we're a nation that goes to war in coalitions. Every day we have to develop and nurture relationships because we can't surge relationships. And out of those relationships comes trust, and you certainly can't surge trust if you haven't done that basic level work. And so in Europe, that's part of the mission, in Europe and Africa, that's part of the mission that we take on board. It's a large task because, you know, between the two AORs, we have 104 countries to work with. That's a large number of countries that have to be accommodated, and they're all very, very interested in what we do. With respect to the mission, I don't have a mission statement separate from the one for the United States Air Force because I think it's clear, it's concise, it's distinct. I do have an addendum. For European-based force structure, you know, what we like to say is we're forward, we're ready, and we're ready now. And I think that the recent reaction to the lawless actions by President Putin validated that because, quite honestly, we were able to react from go to show in 14 hours and put a significant amount of airplanes forward from those forward locations. And so that's why we talk about being forward, that's why we talk about being ready, and that's why we talk about being ready now. The only other things that I want to highlight for you, which I think are important and may inspire some questions. European infrastructure consolidation. After a long effort, all of that information is out and being consumed. I'd be happy to answer questions on that. And then, of course, this new acronym, ERI, European Reassurance Initiative. I can talk about that specifically. We're very, very grateful for those funds because we do believe that we could increase the capability of the alliance, and certainly through the O&M, the exercise money that it provides, we'll be able to better elevate the quality of the interoperability and along the way provide an assurance and deterrence that force can do inside of Europe. We do have permanent base presence, of course. That enables 5 combatant commanders to do their job. Without European infrastructure, 5 combatant commanders would have a very, very hard time doing their job. Of course, I'm talking about EUCOM, I'm talking about AFRICOM, I'm talking about CENTCOM, I'm talking about TRANSCOM, and I'm talking about SOCOM. And so we're about the right size. I'm happy to report. I'm happy to report that our infrastructure pretty much matches our force structure. And like I said, if you have any different points of view on that, I'd be happy to talk about it. The other thing that I want to mention with respect to command and control in particular and CAF capability is the assimilation of emerging threats and emerging requirements. The one that I'm talking about specifically is European Phased Adaptive Approach, the beginning of the process of developing a defense design to handle the emerging threat of theater ballistic missiles and the effect that it could have on stability and future warfighting. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to my esteemed colleague.
Thank you, esteemed colleague. It's been about 4 months since I've taken command, and I have to tell you it's been fast and furious, just as Hawk promised. I do want to say thanks to Hawk for everything that he's done with the Pacific Air Forces as they've transitioned from a management level headquarters to a combat major command. The transformation has been amazing, and the warrior focus that the command has as the air component to PACOM has been amazing, and it's been fun for me to watch. You know, one of the things Hawk told me is it's big and you'll be tired, and he's not wrong. I'm tired. I don't know what time I'm on, actually. I'm glad, Gork, you know what time you're on. You know, just to give you a sense, and I didn't realize this, but just to give you a sense, it's 52% of the Earth's surface, 83% of that is water, and as Admiral Locklear said at our change of command, 100% of it is covered by air. It's 36 nations, 16 time zones, and 60% of the world's population. And as everybody's watched out in the news, you can see some of the challenges in the region. You know, the very slow and persistent land reclamation that the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea makes you concerned about the future of access to the global commons. If you look at North Korea and the behavior that's happening there and the disregard for world order by the North Koreans is cause for concern there. And then if you think about, you know, we hear an awful lot about Russian activities in Gorenc's AOR, but I will tell you the increase in long-range aviation throughout the Pacific region is of high concern, and it's things that we watch every day. So when I sit back and I think about those challenges, and the way that those challenges aren't just contained to the peninsula or not just contained to one part, but it's throughout that region, you think about how are you going to be a part of the stability and maintain the stability in the region. And we do that through three things: partnership, presence, and power projection. You know, I had the privilege of representing the chief about a week after the change of command at a Japanese Air Chiefs conference, and I was able to begin my partnerships with 9 air chiefs from the region, and it was a great way to start. At the end of this month, I get to continue the partnerships as I go to Australia for the Australian Air Show. And it's those stability, those things where you reach out and you touch. As Gorenc mentioned, that it begins today. That trust doesn't just happen in a time of crisis. That trust happens the beginning that you take command and you go out and you visit folks and you see what's happening and what they're doing, and you continue those partnerships. Partnerships can be big like that, or they can be as significant as many airman-to-airman talks, sitting down airman to airman talking about what we do together, whether it's humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, or the opportunity to fly together. You can continue that with presence. One of the things that Hawk started that I think is really amazing is thinking about things as places, not bases. Where do we need to go? Where are the places that we want to be able to operate from, and what does it look like should we need it in a time of need? Presence isn't just that. Presence is engagements. Last year in FY14, the Pacific Airmen did 185 engagements, whether it was as significant, small, and important as Pacific Angel, or all the way up to Red Flag Alaska with multilateral full spectrum training. That kind of presence together is not only the ability to train together, but it sends signals throughout the entire region. And then there's, of course, power projection. One of the great initiatives that's happening in the theater is an initiative called Rapid Raptor, and that's the ability to take 4 Raptors, a C-17, and maintainers and capability, and show up someplace, put everything down, load up, and power project from whatever place, whether it's Guam or someplace else. And so all it does is send messages that we can pick up, we can go, and we can be a part of anything in the region. We've been able to do the theater security packages since 2004, where we deploy fighter force throughout the region, and then continuous bomber presence, B-1 and B-52s at Guam since 2004. So all of those things add to stability in the region, and it shows our commitment as we have continued our presence and renewed presence in the Pacific region. So finally, what I also would like to say is thanks to AFA for what you do each and every day for our airmen and their families, and now to the distinguished colleague, Sevi Wilson.
Well, it's an honor to be here and be on this distinguished panel. I'd also like to thank AFA for what they do for our airmen and families, and all your advocacy throughout our nation for our Air Force and what we do. If I look back a year ago, I sat on a panel here, and I think how much the world has changed in just a year. Okay, a year ago, nobody in this room was talking about Crimea and Ukraine. A year ago, nobody was talking about ISIS and ISIL and the fight there. We weren't talking about Ebola. So I'd say the only constant in our world today is change and the pace of change, and I think we need to think about that as we look forward to the future and what the future holds. One of the things that I think is a distinct U.S. advantage and will continue to be one of those enduring advantages going forward is this globally responsive force that we have, whether it be mobility, ISR, or in the world that I pay particular attention to, is global strike. And the ability to deploy around the world on moment's notice and have a ready force that can do our nation's bidding. So we work closely with General Gorenc and General Robinson. We have bombers, as Lori just mentioned, doing continuous bomber presence in the Pacific and have been doing so for the last 11 years. We've had B-1s in the Middle East since 2001, and they haven't been coming home. And our B-2s regularly deploy both in Europe and to the Pacific. Again, is that visible signal and symbol of U.S. strength and power that deters adversaries, whether it be North Korea or whoever, and as well as assuring allies around the globe that we have your back. Earlier today, also, I got to sit through the C2 panel and listen to the comments that they have as we move forward with command and control in the 21st century. And it really is two distinct words. It is command, it's a commander, and it's control. And how do I control those forces? And what I'm paying particular attention to is how do we do that globally? And how do we stitch that together with regional counterparts? And so whether it be General Robinson or General Gorenc and their teams to provide that globally responsive force with globally assured comms to make sure we can do the mission in whatever denied environment there is out there. And so we're spending a lot of time and energy thinking our way through that problem set. And with that, we have to be able to exercise and train that way. General Carlisle just brought us all together at Nellis for the C2 Summit. It was a great opportunity to talk to some warfighters and see how we move C2 forward, because it is truly foundational to everything we do in our Air Force. I'm also thinking about that and how do we do that in nuclear command and control, because we'll have to nest that inside big C2 bubble. And so it's an exciting time to be in our Air Force. We got lots of challenges around the world, but I can tell you that the airmen that I get to hang out with are ready to do our nation's business. So let me stop talking. I know Scott's got questions over there. We'll be glad to answer them.
Well, thank you all very much. Now, each of your commands was hit by different degrees of impact by sequestration in 2013. As we face the possibility of sequestration in 2016, how are you going to approach this differently? How are you going to prepare for it, and how are you going to deal with it? And do you have any confidence whatsoever that Congress will come across and save the day?
That's an easy question. Thanks, Scott. I think the biggest challenge, and I was in Lori's seat at the time, and in fact, I think as it should be, both Europe and PACAF were the ones that were most protected with respect to sequestration. ACC and what Mike Hostage had to do was actually the hardest challenge. The big challenge in 2013 was we didn't start until halfway through the year. And we spent in the first half as if sequestration wasn't going to happen. So the challenge was we had to take the full year's cut in half the year. And oh, by the way, there was money that was non-discretionary or contract or by law we couldn't touch to include personnel and contracts and other things. So the pool from which we could take money was very small. And the result was we had to take a big hit. They talked 10 or 20%. It actually ended up being 50% of our O&M and things like that. We grounded fighter squadrons, which was terrible, put us into a deeper readiness hole. And again, what Mike was forced to do was make sure that the folks who were going downrange were the most prepared, capable, and equipped they could possibly be. I think what we've done this year, and the leadership of the Air Force, Secretary James General Welsh, obviously we are anticipating it. We are making the tough calls early, so we start the year understanding. The President's budget is above BCA level, but within the Air Force we have looked at, if law does not change, if we have the decision ability, which once it gets to Congress, it's Congress's decision on where we make those cuts. So we're better prepared. We're going into it realizing that it could very possibly happen, and that if we have a choice, and when the leadership and all of us spend time up on Capitol Hill, we tell them if we have to cut back to BCA level, what we would do. So we're starting off in a better position. Having said that, and I think universally, Secretary James General Welsh and everyone here has said this, if we live through BCA level budgets, through the fight up into the next decade, we will fundamentally be a different Air Force than we are today. We will not be able to do what we do today because there simply will not be enough total obligation authority to get there. So we just go back to what we're all trying to do, and that is we have to produce the very best Air Force we can given the resources the American people give us. And that will be the decisions of what to cut. And it's come through in many different events and many different discussions on the decisions we made on what to cut. They were not decisions we wanted to make, but given the resources we had to make, and that's where we ended up where we're at today. So, and whether with respect to confidence in Congress changing the law, my most recent time on the Hill, which was about 2 weeks ago, and Secretary James General Welsh have a better feeling for this, but within the Armed Services Committee, both the HASC and SASC, I think there's realization what BCA level budgets would do to us. Sadly, outside of those two committees, it's not being talked about very much, which to me says it's probably, I don't have a lot of positive that will be released from BCA level budgets. So, Gorenc, would you like to respond?
I like when people ask me congressional questions on a panel and I'm sitting between two former LLs. I'll defer the answer to that question. I do want to just highlight, though, the one thing that we did learn about operating in a sequestered environment. 13 was a pretty important year for us because it forced us to really look into the effects of not flying airplanes on a day-to-day basis. All of the models with respect to if you have a squadron that sits down for a month, it takes an exponential amount of time to get back to that level of readiness. And I think that, we really need to, prepare the battlefield and describe what the effect of any sequestered budget and a long-standing, having a squadron sit on the ground. So that's really the only thing I wanted to mention, because in the end, what we said was exactly what kind of came to fruition with respect to recovering from those sequestered budgets. I do think it solidified our commitment to the flying hour program and the weapon system support necessary to do the work. And so between us and the CAF, I think that there's a solidified view of what, in fact, we would do if we got into that situation again. Because the corrosive effect of having squadrons sit around and not fly airplanes cannot be understated, because it affects the airplanes, it affects the people, it affects the training, and does long-term damage to our Air Force.
I'd like to add to what Gorenc said about I agree with him what he said about the flying part, so I won't comment on that because, I was able, when sitting at Air Combat Command during that, to watch that corrosive effect and watch the planning and the replanning. So I won't add to that, but what I will add to, as Hawk said, the Pacific Air Forces were relatively untouched, but one of the things that we did pay a price in, and that was partnerships. When we had to cancel exercises and cancel TDYs and cancel those things that we talked about, that I talked about earlier, as we reach out and touch and build trust and confidence in relationships, when you touch that and when you break that, that is a concern for a long-term commitment and trust and confidence with your friends and allies. And so if we've learned anything, it's now, what are we going to do to prioritize our friendships, and what are we going to do to prioritize our TDYs should we have a sequestered budget, and how do we maintain that trust and confidence throughout the region should the sequestered budget come back. That's probably the place where I get most concerned, because that trust and confidence is something that we need each and every day as we are the stability in the region. And I will have to agree with Hawk, having been on the Hill recently, but more importantly, watching the sequestration hearing, but not seeing much talked about after that, not seeing much talked about at all from anybody. I have huge concerns on whether or not sequestration will go away.
I'll pick up a tangible example of what General Robinson just talked about. So in the spring of 2013, we flew a deterrence and assurance sortie with a B-2 from Whiteman Air Force Base to South Korea and back. And it was a 38-hour sortie. It involved 5 different refuelings, 10 different tankers, AWACS, and an immense amount of coordination between from the White House to the Pentagon, through all the different air operations centers along the way. And after that, sequestration hit, and we canceled every overseas training exercise involving bombers for the next year. So there were air crews that didn't get that opportunity to do that. On the South Korea deter and assure sortie, no one was shooting back at us. So I told the chief at the time that I said, if we have to do this again and someone's shooting back, and I've got a B-52 air crew and he hasn't had an air refueling in 90 days, and he may be current, but he's not proficient, he's over the middle of the Pacific in the middle of the night in bad weather, and I'm counting on him to do his mission, we've got a lot of risk. So that's a tangible impact of what sequestration did to our Air Force. And there's lots more. You know, when we cancel a weapons school class, we can't get that back. Right? There's 100 people that would have graduated from a weapons school class that our Air Force doesn't have now. Those are things that do great harm to our nation. We cannot afford that as we go forward with any type of future budget. And we're going to have to prioritize what's important, but when we have impacts like that, that has a really big impact on our Air Force and a long-term impact.
Thanks. General Gorenc, I'll pass this one on to you. You raised the issue of infrastructure consolidation in Europe, and you and I were earlier talking about force structure levels in Europe as well. In light of the activities in Ukraine and that neck of the woods, would you talk about force structure levels? Are you sufficient? Do we have enough deterrence in Europe today to cause folks to consider what they're doing?
I mean, I'm comfortable with what we have. I mean, clearly, many of these decisions were made well prior to the resurgence of Russia, and so I'm comfortable with it. And you know, I think at this kind of discussion always ends up with a fundamental understanding that in the end we have force structure available in Europe to be forward ready and now. It's full spectrum, it's well trained, but the fact of the matter is if I had a situation in Europe, Africa, or any other place that, you know, requires European infrastructure, I have an entire expeditionary Air Force to reach back to and make requests for capability. And I'm not uncomfortable with rotational forces. We've been operating that way for a long time. I'm confident in anything that Hawk would be able to provide. You know, but the question is, for the worldwide situation, where would the priority lie? And, you know, on any given day, I don't know exactly, you know, what the situation's going to be in the world. I love what Sevi described as, you know, where we were last year versus where we were this year, and the 3 things that popped up on the radar scope that nobody affected. However, each one of them required air power to respond in a very precise way and in a fast way. And so I guess the answer to your question is I'm comfortable with the forward presence in Europe. Do I want more? Of course I want more. But the fact of the matter is you know, we're an Air Force that's been making some key decisions on where we're going to have forward presence and where we're going to supplement with rotational force. The good thing about European infrastructure consolidation, those commanders previous to me and myself when I got in Europe, we always used to carry the mantra, if you want to reduce in Europe, it's infrastructure, not force structure. We worked very closely with OSD on the project of European infrastructure. The decisions we made with European infrastructure consolidation, we were fully involved with it. We made our case. Quite honestly, I didn't have to make a case for a lot of the infrastructure. It made other combatant commanders were in there describing what they needed in Europe. And so for the first time in a long time, once the decisions of European infrastructure consolidation are completely implemented, I can honestly say we have a good balance between infrastructure and force structure. And what I want everybody to know is the discussion about forward basing, particularly in Europe, to me, should be over. Because the reality is that since the fall of the Berlin Wall, Europe in every category with respect to the Air Force is downsized by a full 75%. In order to do the building partnership capacity that is resident and inherent in the American way of war, both the infrastructure and the force structure are nicely sized. If we go below that, there's going to be risk to that, and certainly I always want to go above it. But the other thing is, for the first time ever, we actually got a TSP package in Europe. There are 12 A-10s right now in Europe flying out of Spangdahlem for a 6-month period. And for that, I'm grateful. I have plenty of work for them to do, and it'll just reinforce to the Europeans that when we need to elevate our training, when we need capability to continue to build partnerships and foster interoperability, the Air Force will respond. So that's it.
Thank you. General Carlisle, the F-22's been flying in combat here for a few months. Are there any surprises, any lessons learned that have come from its initial implementation?
I don't know if I'd call it surprises. It's been, I think across the spectrum, people would say it's even exceeded our expectations. The airplane has performed fantastically, and what we have discovered with its ability to go to areas where other aircraft maybe can't, its ability to re-roll and to mission manage the entire force, what we've discovered, which I think we knew, but it is reinforced, is the fact that when you have F-22s in a package, every single airplane in that package is better because the F-22s are there. And whether it's their strike, whether it's their escort, whether it's their ability to manage the force and to do re-rolls real time in the middle of the fight, to do dynamic targeting, all of those things are just re-emphasized. And any, if you talk Kid Hesterman over there, he'll tell you that we're putting Raptors into every package whenever we can, and it is most of the time, because they've exceeded even what we expected with making the entire package a better package.
Excellent, thanks. For USAFE and PACAF, I guess both, can you talk about any challenges you have with intel and information sharing with allies and coalition partners, especially based on our own classification procedures and policies?
The answer for me is, of course. I mean, I think that the person that asked that question knows there's a challenge with that. So, and it's an ongoing challenge. It's one that we continue to work. Sometimes urgency helps in, the ability to share data. But I think there's fundamentally two issues when it comes to intel sharing. First of all, there's policy, and I'm not the policy guy, except for, the inputs that I can make with respect to what is the coalition of the willing, when are we going to transition to NATO, all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, there's the technical challenges with intel sharing. Some of those challenges involve the ability to move data from machine to machine. And so I just want to underscore that, both of those are unique and distinct problems. There's policy issues, at the political level. There's policy issues with the technical ability to do that and to share that data. But the bottom line is, for us, and every day we're trying to enforce standards to keep the capability of moving information from machine to machine. Without the ability to move that information machine to machine in today's environment and to do the command and control necessary, you will significantly decrease the effectiveness of the coalition.
I'm with Gorenc. Whoever asked knows that there's a problem. I would tell you that we have some capability and capacity to do some intel sharing, but place where I want to go is, why is it important? Why is it important to share intel? Is it important just so you're sharing that information? I would contend the importance of sharing intel is, again, that building of trust and confidence, and the understanding that we are going to work together and we're here to help wherever and whenever needed. That trust and confidence that you can do day to day when your ability to share things with your coalition partners, your allied partners, underpins everything that's going to happen should something happen in a time of crisis, and will build that trust and confidence. So when I talk about it and the need for more capacity and capability, it's not just so I get more information, but it's more to continue to build on that partnership and relationship so the trust and confidence keeps going up.
Thank you very much. General Wilson, in light of the 16 budget, what's your feeling about how serious DOD is about concern modernizing the land-based leg of the triad? Do you think we're going to be, are we on the right track? Are we keeping up with the Russians who are modernizing their forces? And is a 3-star the appropriate level of command for a global strike command?
Good luck. Yeah, good luck with that one, right? Well, let me start with a couple of them. So, last year we had a bunch of reviews, reviews. So we had the Creed and Fanta report, we had the Welsh Harvey report. They all underscored a couple of things, that we'd lost some focus throughout the nuclear enterprise, and we hadn't sustained the commitment that we needed to. And so Secretary of Defense Hagel and Secretary Work, as well as the Secretary and the Chief, have been very powerful influences to ensure that the resources were flowed appropriately to the nuclear enterprise. So at Secretary Hagel's press conference a few weeks back, he talked about a 10% year-over-year increase, and so we're seeing a little bit of that in the 16 budget coming to the nuclear enterprise, and certainly we have lots of things, a prioritized list to be able to do that. But I'd also say lots of that money is in the presidential budget, and if there's a sequestered budget, there's going to be some real challenges because they won't get funded. And I think it's absolutely mandatory that we do that. Most people don't really think much about our ICBM leg of the triad, but the missiles were actually designed in the 50s. The first holes were dug at our bases at Malmstrom was Wing 1 in the early 60s, and the Minuteman I went on alert in 1962. The Minuteman III that we currently have has been on alert since the mid-60s. Today, the lower stage of the missile is still a Minuteman I missile. So we've got an old missile. We're doing all the service life extensions on it, but those missiles are foundational to our national security. If you look, they are the thing that are going to prevent any out-of-the-blue attack against the United States, because they raise the ante and make another nation say, I just can't do that. And they're relatively inexpensive in the big scheme of things. So we're committed to go forward with this ground-based strategic deterrent. We've gone through the analysis of alternatives. We're working with OSD and folks to bring forward an integrated capability in about 2030.
Thank you. General Carlisle, of course, the Air Force was trying to divest itself of the A-10 in order to do a number of things: save money and free up maintenance personnel for the IOC of the F-35. If the A-10, in fact, is not allowed to be retired, how are you going to handle the maintenance issues and find the personnel you need for that IOC?
Tremendous challenge. I think that the discussion has to actually go beyond that. So I think we had a discussion, the Chief and the Secretary, yesterday reference how to get to IOC at Hill for the IOC requirements, number of aircraft, and the capabilities. There's a couple of ways that we're looking at potentially doing that, and I think most folks are aware of that. We're looking at potentially at one of the FTU bases, Luke, of doing contract maintenance to some extent. We're looking at other having to potentially take down some squadrons earlier that are going to transition, but transition them earlier. All of those things are a short-term fix. The challenge that I see, I believe, and I know the Secretary and Chief do as well, we got some challenges ahead of us, but I believe we'll get to IOC. I think we'll be able to get to that requirement, but it just grows after that. So my challenge is, I think we have a way forward to get to an IOC in 16 sometime between August and December, but that's just the beginning. And then we're going to be producing airplanes and buying airplanes at a fairly high rate, and we're not going to buy them and park them. We have to grow that maintenance capability, and it grows. It's 300 or so in the early time, but it grows to 2,000 folks as you get out towards the end of the fight-up. So we have got to figure out how to, because the Air Force isn't getting any bigger, so we have got to figure out how to retire some aircraft and replace them with F-35s, and the maintenance manpower is a key component of that. And so as we work our way through the fight-up, we have got to not just worry about IOC, but we got to worry about what happens after that and where we're going. And it is a challenge if we can't retire aircraft.
I wonder if we could talk about the campaign against ISIS, ISIL, whatever we want to call them. I'm not even sure why we can't come up with a single name for who the bad guys are. But up until recently, when the Jordanian pilot was killed, the level of information, the level of effort appeared to be fairly low compared to what we've seen in the past when we create air campaigns against a threat. Can you talk about the level of effort, and is it a matter of not being able to find targets? Is it a matter of the coalition partners? What are the things that influence the level of effort that are going into ISIS?
Again, a great question, and we'll stay away from operational details because obviously that's something you don't talk about in no open forum. But what I will say, one thing that's incredibly frustrating to me is air power is not working. And you hear a lot of media in particular talk about that, and a lot of people that don't understand talk about that. And in fact, air power is doing fantastic, and the folks over there are doing tremendous work. And some of the things we've done, their ability to finance has been severely basically cut off because of some things we've done to take out their ability to use black market oil and their refining capability, their ability to mass with any numbers, their ability to communicate and control what's going on. Has been degraded significantly. We've taken back Kobani. We're holding Mosul. We're going to probably go back into Mosul and Baji and all of those. So air power is actually being very effective. And we've changed the way they can operate. They can't mass. They can't control their forces. People talk about the influx of fighters, which is a huge challenge, but then what you do with them when you can't mass numbers and you can't command and control them. So it is being effective. I think that it's a different fight, and I think that's the other thing is this, comparing it to what we did in Iraqi Freedom or Desert Storm or Enduring Freedom, this is a different fight, and we just got to acknowledge that, and the way we're going about it and what General Austin and General Hesterman are doing over there and General Terry as the Joint Task Force Commander, it's being successful. Now, we got a lot more work to do. We have to find a way forward, and I think is a big part of it, not just the actual fight, but what the GCC and how they approach it. It's an existential threat to their countries, and they have to acknowledge that, and then as they continue on, what they're going to do to continue to hold ground and continue to win that fight. So it is a different fight. I think comparing it to the previous ones is because it is significantly different. I think air power has had tremendous effect, and what is being accomplished over there by the air component has been very successful, and it's continuing at a pace that is getting the job done in severely degrading, stopping and severely degrading the force out there.
I think on behalf of Lori and I, the one thing that I want to highlight with respect to ISIS, I'm not on, obviously it's not my theater, it's not Lori's, but take a look at who's there with us, because it reinforces the work that we do worldwide, because when things happen, there are people that choose to go with us, And that interoperability, the ability to switch on and operate in a coalition way from day one, is something that has to be brought out as a topic of goodness at every opportunity. And that's why forward-based work is so important, because every time we turn around and we are pursuing the aspirations of the United States, the same cast of characters are there, and they're operating in an interoperable way from day one.
Thank you. And this will be for everybody. Please share your perspectives about the rising cyber challenges in command and control in particular. Certainly is in the news today because mostly of civilian problems, but what keeps you up regarding cyber?
Everything. My banking account is what I'm worried about. I think cyber is, obviously it's growing, it's a man-made domain. I think the military portion of that is just a portion of it. There's a huge domestic and the civilian approach to cyber in defending the United States in ways that are some a lot inside the military, some are not inside the military. And if you look at what Admiral Mike Rogers is doing and what NSA does and Cybercom does, that is and what the United States government does reference to cyber. So I think it's broader, and it's a huge challenge for the entire country. Militarily, I think exactly what you mentioned. We need to be able to control theater air power wherever and whenever our nation asks us to do it. We have to have agile, flexible, resilient command and control, information control, the ability to pass information, the ability to collect and disseminate intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance information, and control the forces. So how we get to that and how we build that, a large portion of the C2 Summit talked about how we get that agile, flexible, resilient command and control to control theater air power across the spectrum. So we have folks like John Hyten out there, brilliant commander of Air Force Space Command, talks about fighting SATCOM. That's something that wasn't talked about before, but how do you fight SATCOM to get the bandwidth and the information where you want it, when you want it, and when you need to do it? And there's a way to do that, and we just have to get after that. How you build is centralized command, decentralized execution, the basic tenet of control of air power. How do you take advantage of distributed? How do you have a flexible and agile command and control system that can respond to deception, denial of C2 nodes? And how do you take advantage of that? Those are all the things we're working on, and that's all part of the C2 Summit. But I think ultimately, it's a national problem, and militarily, we're working on our part of it very hard. But what keeps me up at night is that command and control of theater air power to accomplish the mission in any theater we're asked to operate in across the world.
So I guess what I would tell you that keeps me up at night, reference command and control, is, as Hawk just said, assured comms. But when I think about assured comms, we always talk about, we'll either have comms or we won't have comms. What I worry about is the degradation of communications and our ability to detect that and understand that. I get concerned sometimes that we might think we're transmitting and people are receiving, but that might not be happening. It's easy to tell when you have communications, and it's easy to tell when you don't have communications, but it's very difficult to understand the degradation of those communications. And then as I think in the Pacific Theater, with the vast distances and the need to be able to command and control forces throughout the theater, is now, what if, as we're understanding the degradation of the communications, what is our ability to continue operations should we need to? And how do we do that? Do you do it forward, or do you do it with reach back? And where do you do it if you do it forward, and where do you do it if you do it reach back? So those are the two things that I think through as I think about theater command and control and the ability to command and control air power, is understanding degradation and understanding continuation of operations.
I agree with everything that's just been said. I think the other part is assured data and making sure that we can count on it. And then how do we move forward? I think this will be part of this third offset that people talk about in terms of our command and control and our ability to integrate cyberspace and kinetics across the spectrum to our advantage and not be influenced by adversaries who are going to try and do the exact opposite to us. So there's certainly an offense-defense mix here, but that assured calm and the ability to connect all the different stovepipes between cyberspace and kinetic, I think will be really important moving forward.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that's been said here. I will take it down a notch a little bit, because one of the things that I think is interesting about this domain is the integration of cyber effects and kinetic effects and the relationship between them. You know, we're very good on the kinetic side of predicting what the result will be. We're less sure exactly of what will happen with respect to the cyber effect, how long, how effective, you know, what branches and sequels need to be developed in order to integrate cyber and and kinetic effects. The problem with it is, right now, the ability to predict what will happen creates so many branches and sequels, or could create so many branches and sequels, that it will exceed the capacity of the AOC to actually do the work, particularly if it's a high-speed conflict or a fast-moving conflict.
Well, thank you all very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I thank you very much for your participation.